My name is Jim Wilcox. I am the proud owner of Wilcox & Associates. We are a Sandler performance organization based in northern Indiana. We've got offices in Fort Wayne and South Bend, actually on Notre Dame's campus, which is pretty cool, unless you're a Michigan fan. But we won't talk about those. Totally kidding. Love the school, respect the school, and we have a great relationship with them. So I am joined by one of my two esteemed colleagues, Mr. Timothy Berry. Would you introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. Tim Berry. I own the Sandler Performance Center in Fort Worth in the great state of Texas. And happy to be here. This is one of the high points of the week, just bantering back and forth and giving good content to everybody. So happy to be here and looking forward to today's topic for sure.
And John Vanderslice is coming off of another webinar, so he may be running late, and hopefully he can make it here. If he does, we'll introduce him when he comes in. So just prior to people coming into the room, we were commenting that every single one of these grab and growth tactics webinars are recorded on the wilcox.sandler.com site. There is a link to those. You can see those in the chat box, or you can go to Tim's site, which is salesresults.sandler.com. Is that correct, Tim?
Yep. Easiest way to do it is just go to YouTube and do Sandler Training of Fort Worth, and everything is on the YouTube page. So
perfect. All right. So if you want to look at a past webinar, you're welcome to do that. The intent of these webinars is to give you 30 minutes of tactical content that you can go out and execute on right away. So today we are going to talk about questioning strategies. And one of the things we like to do is have you get your chat fingers warmed up. So in chat, here's what I want you to do. What's your go-to strategy for questioning when you are in front of a prospect? When you're in a sales call, you've got a sales motion going. What's your go-to questioning strategy, assuming you have one? Assuming you have one. So what's your favorite question to ask? Throw that in chat. We'll discuss that. Go ahead and start typing now. And,
when you're in chat, make sure that you've got it the drop down for all panelists and attendees.
Michael Norton, appreciate you having here. For those who don't know, Michael Norton is my twin, or maybe I'm his twin. I'm not sure which one that is. But can you tell me more? Absolutely. I love that as a strategy. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a couple minutes. Tell me more about what you're facing. Thanks, Todd. Help me understand why. Not sure I understand. Can you give me an example? So all of the Sandler alumni are chiming in. Doug Stevens, what result would make you very happy? Kind of looking forward to the end. I love that. What result, or if I can embellish, what outcome would make you very happy? Brandon from Disher, help me understand this through your eyes. I love that. That is great. Thank you. All right, so here's the challenge at the end of the day. I think most sales professionals talk too much. We come in and we want to show up and throw up. Which is a problem or a challenge for traditional sales professionals. So keep chat going. Certainly answer it in your head if you're not typing, but answer the following question. How much do you know about my industry? How would you answer that? And if you're a Sandler alumni, let the newbies go first. Let's see how they might answer it. Or how would you answer this question? Have you done any work with my competitors? Throw some answers in chat. Make this interactive. How would you answer these questions? What do you know about my industry? Have you worked with any of my competitors?
That's I love those first two questions, because those are questions, Jim, that you get all the time from prospects. Mm-hmm. It's the trap is that most sales professionals do talk too much, and they get, they can't wait to begin to speak. And then when that happens,
that's right.
Have you done any work with my competitors? There's a lot of times those are going to be a lot of there's going to be some stammering going on at that point if you haven't, and if you have, the sales professionals start vomiting. So
that's right. The other one that is interesting because it is a statement disguised as a question is, Tim, I already have a guy, or I have a firm, or I have a partner. I got somebody who does that for me. And then the last one is, well, why should we pick you over anybody else? Or what makes you any better than the person that I have? Or why should we consider you or your company? The problem with all this and the irony of all of this is when you think about yourself as a buyer, too often we're in front of a sales professional and our motive is to get out of the conversation. The motive is to get away often. Now, I'm not saying always, but often that's the case. And then we get these type of questions. And the problem with these type of questions is that they're often never the real question. But for a lot of sales professionals, it sets us off on our talk tracks. Well, let me tell you about what I know about your industry, or absolutely have worked in your area before, or worked with your competitors. And we start answering without really understanding the true intent of the question. And that's where we can get into trouble, when we talk more than we listen. And so today what I want to do is talk about some strategies that can help you uncover the truth, some strategies that can help you understand what the real issues are that you are dealing with. And so let's look at a few of those from a questioning perspective. Now, strategy number one, this will be very, very familiar if you know or understand Sandler. The first one is reversing. And Tim, share with everybody on the call, what is reversing?
Sure. So reversing is a super simple concept, and all it is it's answering a question with another question. Mm-hmm. It's just very, very, very simple. And the concept, the idea is that somebody will throw a question out like, hey, have you worked with our competitors in the past? Before we start answering, we don't really know where the question's coming from. And so reversing helps us gain some additional clarity. We're at this point where we're going to reverse it and say something to the effect of, that sounds like something that's important to you. Help me understand where that's coming from. Or again, you're trying to trigger a conversation because in the investigation process, the salesperson doesn't have any additional information. They don't have any basis for it. And so as opposed to vomiting the answer out, reversing is a super important question because it helps you gain clarity.
Absolutely. So I may reverse one of those questions. For example, if Tim asks me, hey, have you worked with any of our competitors before? I may say, that's interesting. There's likely a reason you asked me that question just now, Tim. And Tim may say, one of a number of things that can, help me understand how to align my answer. And so if Tim says, I'll never work with a company that's working with any of our competitors currently, that's a different conversation than, look, I want to make sure that I'm working with a firm that understands my industry. Two very different answers are coming. Now, I'm going to align the right thing, for the client, but it's going to come in one of two different ways. So, Tim, I saw a hand go up. Can you, in chat? Not sure if that was a question or somebody accidentally clicked, but I want to make sure we address everything.
No, I think somebody, Brandon from Disher, just help me see the problem through your eyes. Yep. There's just a couple of answers from the previous slide. So
perfect. All right. So number one is reversing. That is a staple of Sandler. That is something that we should be very adept at. Now we've got to be careful because it's easy to weaponize reversing, right? The key to reversing is being professionally curious. It is not a weapon. It's not an interrogation. But if I suspect that the question being asked is not the real question, then a strategy for that is to simply reverse it. So if Tim asks me, for example, what type of support staff do you have in your organization to help ensure success? I may want to reverse that. I may want to say, Tim, that's a wonderful question. Help me understand when you say support staff, what are you envisioning, right? And that goes to kind of strategy 1A, is I want to make sure I soften all my statements ahead of any reverse. And those are the things like, hey, it's a great question. I'm glad you asked that. It's a good point. I get that a lot. I want to soften that so that it doesn't become a weapon. I want to make it conversational. Tim, I don't know if you have any other softening statements that you like to use.
Yeah, sure. It's again, and the concept is you don't want to make this an interrogation. If you're just checking a box to say, oh, I reversed, then you'll make the other, the receiver, the prospect, feel uncomfortable. And so it's always good just to soften the blow of the question, and it could really be almost any statements. Hey, I get that question a lot, and then you can reverse. Then, so help me understand where, what the basis for, what's the context of your question. Or another softening statement would be pretty much anything. Well, you know what?
Yep.
That's something that I get asked frequently, or just about anything.
Or I haven't been asked that one in a while. Tim, that's a great question. Haven't gotten that one in a while. You brought that up for a reason.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
So just make sure it's not an interrogation. You don't want to just have a list of questions and hammer the snots out of people. That's going to make the prospect feel uncomfortable, and it's going to threaten the trust that you've built up to that point. So make it conversational. There's an art form. Jim, you mentioned weaponizing, the reversing tactic, and that's really true. Make this conversational. Don't make it robotic.
Yep, absolutely. Second strategy, and again, if you understand Sandler, then you've at least heard of the dummy curve, right? And the dummy curve is very closely related to reversing, but the dummy curve has to do with playing dumb on purpose, for example. So we often, as sales professionals, want to show up having all the answers. We want to show up looking good. We want to show up having knowledge and credibility. And sometimes the way that is translated is that I end up talking too much. So in my effort, and this was something I suffered from for a long time early in my sales career, is I wanted you to see me as credible. And so when somebody would say, hey, Jim, what does your product do related to X? I would start talking. Well, let me share with you what it does and how it does it. And, I would begin to bore you to death with my answers. And sometimes those answers weren't necessarily relevant to the real question being asked. So playing dumb on purpose just a little bit can serve us well. So if Tim says to me, for example, hey, Jim, what does your product do in relation to X? I may say, Tim, I'm sorry, in relation to X, can you provide me some clarity on that? I'm simply playing dumb on purpose. The intent behind that is to seek to understand, what is Tim really asking me? And these are tools that we can use to get to answering the real question being asked, because so many times we get smoke screens, right? The questions come as a smoke screen. And Tim, I didn't, if you want to take a second and just comment on, why do we get smoke screens from prospects?
Yeah, I mean, the smoke screen and they don't do it on purpose, but in the end, people don't want to be sold. None of us want to be sold. We as salespeople don't want to be sold. And so we'll throw up a smoke screen to give as little information as humanly possible, so we don't get manipulated into or convinced into making a decision that we might regret later down the line. So we'll throw up a smoke screen, and we hope we can extract maximum information out of the salesperson while not giving up really any of our cards. We don't want to play our hand in front of them.
Yeah. So then, thank you. So for those taking notes, the dummy curve is really playing dumb or playing a little bit innocent or naive on purpose, right? So if you think about where you came from and how you built your knowledge base, most of us have done that by asking questions, right? So when cars are my hobby, and a lot of people know that, and I work on cars. So when I first started learning how to change the brakes out on my car, I asked a lot of questions. Hey, what does that do? Or, hey, why do we have to hang the caliper, right, on a hanger when we're swapping out the disc? Well, now I know the obvious answer to that, right? I know the obvious answer, but it may serve me well if I'm learning a new technique to say, well, why are you hanging it back in that direction? There may be something specific in there. And that's how I learn, right? That's how I learn to go from not knowing anything about cars to being able to effectively and efficiently service my own vehicles, which I like to do as a hobby. Same thing translates in a selling world, right?
Jim, I love that. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I think this is amazing. The dummy curve is a great tactic because, again, this requires some discipline from the salesperson, because a lot of times as salespeople, we've got the answers. We know the answers. And right. So we want to rescue the prospect at every opportunity. And here's just this does take some practice, and it takes some discipline, because we have to suspend that need to look great in front of
or be
prospect.
Liked, or yep.
Yeah. So anyway, that's all I wanted to throw in there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, for me to get back to that place on purpose where I'm doing more of the listening and learning, right, and they're telling me more, then I can leverage a dummy curve as a technique. And one of the things that I say frequently to clients that we have is, the more the prospect is talking, the more the truth comes out, right? And if we acknowledge that we often get smoke screens and misinformation up front, if I can use these techniques to get them talking, then I can truly understand how to help them solve their own problems. All right, strategy number 3 from a questioning strategy perspective is something that we call negative reverse selling. And there's a couple definitions of negative reverse selling. Sometimes you'll hear it referred to in Sandler as strip lining. At the end of the day, negative reverse selling is doing the opposite of what the prospect is expecting. It's really doing the opposite. It's in some ways reverse psychology. And the idea is to, by and large, get the prospect to defend, justify, and explain their position. Now, this is a twist on what happens frequently. Often we'll get the question of, hey, what makes you any better than your competition? And that's a tough one to answer. Now, the old me would have stood up and beat my chest and said, well, let me tell you, it's game on right now, right? I've got a high competitive style. I've got a high need to be liked or seen as credible. So now you're in for it. Now I'm just going to give it to you, and good luck, because you're my captive now. And the new me would take a different approach to that. Certainly I could reverse, right? Hey, it's interesting you brought that up. I'm curious, what would you have to see out of me to make you believe I'm any better, right? Negative reverse would have me say, Tim, there's probably nothing I could tell you that would lead you to believe that we're any better. And then I got to pause. And Tim made a great point earlier that a lot of these take discipline and intent on the salesperson's part. Negative reverse selling is counterintuitive, right? It's very counterintuitive. It was counterintuitive to me, but it's a wonderful strategy when it's applied appropriately. So again, if Tim says to me, go ahead and role play it out. So Tim, you're going to ask me about, what makes me any better?
Yeah. So Jim, I talked to all kinds of people about your type of service. Really, what makes you any better than anybody else?
Tim, I'm not sure there is anything that is going to lead you to believe we're better. What would you have to see from your perspective? Right? So there's an example of negative reverse selling, right? It's really doing the opposite of what Tim says so that Tim defends, justifies, and explains his position. Because what's likely coming next, Tim, when I put it back on you and say, look, Tim, I'm not sure I can tell you anything that's going to, make you jump up and down. What would you have to hear out of me to lead you to believe we're better?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. And well, I just want to make sure that there is some reinforcement training that my people can do online in between sessions. And so that's a huge concern of mine.
Yeah, so time out of the role play there. Now I just exposed that the thing that's important to Tim is reinforcement, and I can dig into that a little more. So that's the concept behind negative reverse selling. It is doing the opposite of what the person in front of you is expecting you to do. And this one's a little counterintuitive, and it takes a little bit of practice. Certainly, if you want more information on this, reach out to myself or Tim or John. We're happy to go a little deeper with this one. Tim, any final words on negative reverse selling?
This one is there's a little bit of an art form in terms of when and how often to use this, and so you can fail catastrophically. You can destroy a relationship if you're using this as a weapon. There's a right time to use it. You have to have some trust built up. And you can't use it as a blunt instrument, clubbing somebody over the head with it. So there's there's an art form to leveraging this, and you don't want to overuse it. If you say if you negative reverse and you do it for the entire 60-minute conversation that you're having, you're likely going to come off as manipulative or weird at the best. There's a right place and a right time to use this, and it takes a lot of practice to know when and how to actually use it. So
yep, thank you. All right, next one. We call this multiple choice questions. If you've been in Sandler a long time, this used to be referred to as menu or Chinese menu questions, simply multiple choice. So the concept here is I'm going to give you a couple choices, 2 or 3. I like groupings of 3. And then I'm going to have you answer from those choices. The idea being is that you're going to help narrow down my direction, right? So if Tim says to me, hey, Jim, what's the value proposition that you bring to the table? If I choose to use this as a technique, I'm going to say, Tim, you know what? Here's what my clients would tell you. Some would tell you that they like the one-on-one engagement that we provide. Others would tell you it's not so much one-on-one, it's more in the customization of the engagement. And then the third group would tell you that, Jim, we like your varied experience and the length of time that you've been in this business. So Tim, as you think about those, what stands out the most to you, right? So what I'm doing is I'm helping Tim narrow down his choice. I want it to be Tim's words because I know that Tim's not going to argue with his own data. The risk is if I have multiple directions to go down, I want to make sure I'm narrowing it down to the right one. And so rather than talking about all 3, I can save myself some time by leveraging this particular questioning strategy with Tim to help narrow down what's a real issue for Tim or what is top of mind for Tim, for example. So multiple choice questions can be incredibly powerful in your repertoire of questioning strategies. The last one that we'll spend a few minutes of time on, which happens to be my personal favorite, are presumptive questions. So presumptive questions for me are some of the most powerful questions out there. Now, before we get into presumptive questions, I was on a coaching call earlier today, and a gentleman was asking me, how do I differentiate, right? How do I differentiate as I'm selling a product or service where there's a lot of competition and the competition is good? And that's a wonderful question to ask. And I think that, for many of us, if we're hanging our hat on price, service, and quality and delivery, right? If that's our differentiator, even if it's true, right? We all have great quality, great price, great service, great delivery. The challenge becomes if we go down the street and suddenly work for our competitor, what are they telling prospects out there? Probably the same thing. So I think in a lot of industries, we can differentiate ourselves by the questions we ask. And one of the things that I would encourage everybody on this webinar to track is the number of times that you get a, wow, Jim, that's a good question, right? When you get a, wow, Adam, that's a good question. Nobody's ever asked me that. Because when you do that, and when somebody says, hey, that's a great question, that's a good question, wow, I don't get asked that, hadn't thought of that, those are ways that you differentiate from everybody else out there who is singing the same song, making the same noise, for example. Now, presumptive questions are one of those strategies that can lead to, boy, that's a good question, hadn't thought of that. Let me give you an example of that. So somebody might say to me, for example, you know, hey, Jim, really struggling with, you know, my sales team, and, you know, we're losing margins as a result. Can you help us? And let's pretend Tim said that to me. So from a presumptive question perspective, I'm going to presume that there are some things that, you know, Tim is doing. I know that the answer is he's probably not. But I may say, Tim, that's interesting that you bring that up. So when you're sitting down with your sales team and you're reviewing deals and you're talking to your team about how decisions are made in regards to margin, right, what do those debriefing conversations look like?
Well,
now,
Jim, it's interesting you asked that because we're not actually having those conversations.
I'm sorry, what's that, Tim?
We're not having those conversations.
So throwing a bonus there for you, going deaf on purpose is often a good strategy as well. That's not in this webinar per se, but I just did it to Tim. So the presumptive question is that I am presuming that he's doing something that he's not actually doing. Now, that can lead me down a path of my next question is likely the one where Tim's going to say, wow, that's a great question. You know, often it's the presumptive question where somebody says, wow, that's a great question, I'm not actually doing that. These are referred to sometimes as trap questions. Now, it's required that I follow up on this question, right? I've also got to pay attention to, am I making Tim really, really uncomfortable? Because I might have to walk that back, right? So I may say something to Tim. So Tim, give me that answer again. We'll role play it out in the last minute or so.
Yeah, so actually, Jim, it's, yeah, we're not having those types of debriefing conversations.
I'm sorry, you're not having them at all, or not related to, you know, just the margin dial?
We're not having them regarding the margin issue.
You know what, Tim, I hear that frequently, right? I hear that frequently, totally common. Let me ask you this, and so I'll time out the role play there. I just walked it back, said, you know what, I made it seem like it's something that I hear frequently. So from a technique perspective, presumptive questions can be incredibly powerful. And to a point Tim made earlier, you've got to be really careful with them, but they're unbelievably powerful types of questions. So we're right up against 12:59, Tim. Some people are already hopping off the call, getting to their next appointment. What I would like you guys to do is give me one takeaway that you got from this very, very quick 30 minutes. I'm always impressed at how fast our time together goes by. But give one takeaway in your chat box. Please make sure you put it out to all attendees. That way we can track and follow up on your comments. We don't retain the comments that are made to only to the panelists. For whatever reason, Zoom doesn't do that. But give one takeaway, type that in the chat box now. We'll hang around for another minute. We really appreciate you guys taking time on this. Again, you can find recordings of these webinars on Tim's YouTube page. I believe they're on John's site, and then certainly on our wilcox.sandler.com page. So
I love that session, Jim. I think questioning strategies is one of my favorite things because it's just so important. What I think is kind of neat is that it's not talking strategies, it's questioning strategies, and that's exactly right. It's really at the core of what we do in Sandler. Is we're not really worried about what you know, it's how much information you can gather. So good stuff. Absolutely. And so I like your comment there, and we could spend hours talking on this, right? Oh. It's questioning strategies, not talking strategies. So, all right, it's 1:01, and I've got to jump on to another call. Good to be with you. Thank you, everyone, for typing in your comments. We really appreciate that you're getting takeaways. Make sure if you know somebody who
can benefit from this, feel free to forward the links, the registration links to the webinars, send them to our page. We're happy to share this knowledge and information with everybody on Wednesdays from, from the grab and go perspective. So everybody have a great day, and we will see you next week on another episode of Grab and Go Growth Strategies. Take care.
Adios.